Hello, everyone, and welcome to Voice Like a Lion podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pemberton, and today I have someone who was introduced to me by a good friend, George Bryant. So George Bryant was also a past guest on the show. So today I have Phil, who is a cash flow expert and a follower of Christ. So I'm really interested to have a conversation with him today. And the fun fact, I always like to start off with some fun facts. This is our first conversation ever. Like, we are meeting for the first time on this podcast today. Phil, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, it is a bit unusual. Normally, I would have met someone before I'm interviewed, but that's fine, mate. I'm looking forward to really getting into it.
Yeah, so the reason why I want to do it this way is same thing I explained a couple minutes before we jumped into it was it's a conversation. So I would just love to know because I really don't know how you and I ended up coming up because with George is very well connected. I'm sure he probably knows the president at this point, but with George there was something between you talking to him, me talking to him where he goes, "Oh, these two people need to meet." So do you know what that was? Because even for me, I'm just like, hey, this is a great guy. I'm excited to meet him, but I'm not sure how we ended up in the same place at the same time,
Yeah, I don't know. I've known George for quite a long time now, and I had the privilege of helping him with his finances. Still do that a little bit, helping him just get things sorted and understanding, where his business was at and where the leaks were, and how he needs to move forward. And so I've known George for a while, and he's just been very grateful for that time that we spent together. And I suppose. And just recently, he interviewed me in his podcast. He says,
very cool.
I know who you need to speak to. And so he connected us two. So
that makes perfect sense then. So this will be a very fun conversation because I'm interested to know with your journey, how did this Phil that I'm here having a conversation with, how were you built over time? Because I know you didn't come out of the womb this Phil. So what does the journey look like for you? And what has been some of the key points that you've discovered along the way?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. When I was 18, my grandma taught me to budget using physical glass jars and physical money. So you can see on the shelf there, she literally in 1989 took me aside as a teenager and said, "This is how you budget your money." And that she lived in the UK. I was over there doing a gap year, and I came back from that. Having learned how to budget my money, I was earning £15 a week as an adventure training instructor, which wasn't a whole lot back then. It's even less today. And I was really passionate about money. And so I just started teaching anyone I knew how to budget, using grandma's system. Over the years, that system evolved from physical glass jars to envelopes to spreadsheet or to paper budgets, then to spreadsheets, and then to I've built my own online budgeting software and money management software now. In the middle there, I became a financial advisor. Ultimately, became a partner in Australia's leading stockbroking and financial planning firm. But just as I reached the point where we were debt-free and earning, close to $1 million a year, I really felt God saying to me, "This isn't where I want you to be. And I want you to walk away from this and focus on helping mums and dads with their finances." And so I stepped. It took me 18 months to make that decision because, when you're earning the sort of money you're earning, and we were able to give literally hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to causes we care about. But I really knew that I couldn't, because on the side, I was still doing my budget coaching. I was still teaching people how to budget. I wasn't allowed to do it as a partner in a stockbroking financial planning firm, but on the side, at evenings, weekends, every spare moment, I was working with people to help them, take control of their finances. And it was such a tough decision. I agonized for 18 months, but in the end, made the decision to leave, stepped into the entrepreneurial world, building my own business. And along the way, you join mastermind groups and this and that. And I found that, your average entrepreneur had no idea how to manage their finances. And there was so much shame and guilt and embarrassment and so much failure. And I listened to your podcast with Steve Walsh a few weeks ago there, where he talked about the fact that, he said, if you can get through your first 2 to 3 years, then you're okay. But he said 50% of businesses fail within that first 2 to 3 years. And that's certainly my experience. And And I know reading your bio too that you talk about how you just kept persevering. It didn't work initially, but it was about perseverance. And so and I've seen that in the last 10 years, just working with entrepreneurs. I still do all my mum and dad stuff, but I now have worked with over 100 different businesses to help them understand their cash flow and help them become more profitable. And I really believe that entrepreneurial failure rate could easily be halved or even better if entrepreneurs just understood their cash flow a little bit better. So that's sort of where I'm at today. It's not. I mean, sounds like it's a straight line. It's not really. It's had all sorts of ups and downs and all sorts of struggles. In the first 3 years of getting into the entrepreneurial world myself, I didn't apply what I taught my clients, and um, it was a struggle. It was a struggle, but you persevere, you push on doors, God opens other doors and other
Yeah.
opportunities, and here we are today.
Thank you for walking us through that. It to me, being through a similar journey, it's definitely not a straight line. Like I can see all the interweavings of what God was doing, and just like sometimes what we as humans do, But
Yeah,
when in the midst of it, because I went through a similar season a few years ago, 3 years ago, where we felt like the Lord was telling us to close down our 7-figure e-commerce store that we had, and it was pretty agonizing. We didn't agonize over it long though; like we killed that thing pretty quick.
yeah,
But what was interesting was just everything mindset wise that happened in the process of it. Because you were talking about agonizing it over the span of 18 months. What was that final thing for you where you said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and walk away from this, and I'm going to focus on the mom and pop stuff.
yeah. I had to know that it was from God, and that
Yeah.
that was the thing. And it was interesting. My partners were trying to convince me not to go, and they said, "But Phil, they're not Christian people." But they said, "But Phil, you're not able to give as much money, and you're not," and that was very, very true. And it was sort of like, had we stayed just a year or 2 years longer, we basically would have been set for life. We live a fairly frugal lifestyle. We've got a fairly simple lifestyle. We do lots of fun stuff, but we don't want for a lot. And so when you're earning the sort of money we were earning, and especially once we'd paid off our home loan and we'd paid off a whole bunch of other stuff, just paid off a home loan and got ourselves in an okay position. It
Yeah.
was, it was, it was like, well, a couple more years of us just earning this sort of money, and we'd be sort of set for life, and be able to give huge amounts of money. And we love giving money. We love visiting your projects we support in Cambodia and so on. But it was just there was so much uncertainty as to stepping into like my financial coaching. And um I don't know, it was amazing. I literally did agonize over it, and so much so that sick. And I was just asking God, is this what you want me to do? And it's funny, sometimes I just thought to myself, if I could just be quiet enough, I would know the answer.
Mm.
But in the end, I don't know that there was a magic moment. I think um Yeah, I don't honestly know if there was a magic moment. We were in the middle of, here in Australia, or in Canberra, we'd had this asbestos issue in houses. And I won't go through the long story, but we actually lost our house
Wow.
to that. Now, when I say lost it, we didn't lose it. The government actually bought it back off us, but we
Yeah.
had to move. We were told we had to move. And it's funny, I really think God has a sense of humor, and also teaches very lessons. Like I'd always said, if I could just get the house paid off, then we'd be okay. Like there'd be no debt. We'd be in a good financial position, and no one could ever take this house off us. And I thought it was very funny that then just as like 3 weeks literally after we had our house paid off, this happened. And it was sort of almost God saying, don't hold on too tightly to anything in this world.
Mm.
And so we ended up with a beautiful, bigger house that was even better for where we were at that time of life. Um, that was perfect for the kids where they were at. Um, but I think, and the government paid us a reasonable amount of money for our house. So at that point, we thought, right, we can't keep holding on to things. We've got to let it go and really just trust that God's got it. And I think that was probably the catalyst.
I love that. Yeah, I think that that's something as a Christian that I've noticed and it's really interesting. I had this conversation with a lady not literally earlier today, and she was talking about there's these moments, these seasons of life where it's like you're graced for it, you're graced to be in that season, and then all of a
Yeah,
sudden the grace lifts, and it's like everything you would have done in the past that would work, all of a sudden it just stops working. And
100%.
and it was interesting to listen to her talk about this because it's like, wait, this just works. Last month this was working. The month before that, this worked really well. Now all of a sudden this doesn't work at all. And and I told her, I said, this is something that I feel like the Lord is working on me, is the fact that there's doors that it's like obviously I'm not supposed to go through them, but but I'll sit there and I'll just push on them anyways. It's like,
Yeah,
maybe. It's like, maybe. And there's been a handful of times where I'm smart enough to just listen the first time. But God has been gracious enough to let me make my plans, and he'll just shut the door in my face. And
yeah,
it's in the way that he's done it, because my wife was telling me this. She's like, he keeps doing it for you for now. It's like, but as you mature in your faith, he's eventually going to trust you enough to make your own choice. And it's like, you can't just always depend that he's always going to close that door. It's like he is talking to you, and he is, because you tell me afterwards, like, yeah, I had these inklings, I believe that he was saying this. It's like, but you still did it anyways. It's
yeah,
like, so there's going to be a maturation phase where you're going to have to just listen the first time. And I
yeah,
thought that's fascinating because, I mean, there's an instance literally a couple of weeks ago. I was explaining this to the lady I was talking to. It was this big deal. It was a big deal that was going to change. It could really have changed our lives. And I'm sitting there and it's all lining up. We're at the negotiating table. And then all of a sudden he's like, yeah, you just send me the agreement. I'm ready to move forward. We've already had 2-3 calls. Everything makes sense as we align. And he gets off the call. I'm sitting there with my business partner, and he's not a Christian. And I said, I don't know what it is. It's like, I can't tell you right now. It's like, but I'm telling you, we shouldn't do this. It's like, I'm telling you in my gut that even if he says yes, even if he wants to do the wire transfer, it's like, it's just no. It's like, we're not going to, in a few years, we're going to look back. If he does say yes and we get into business with him, then we're going to look back and wish we hadn't done it.
yeah,
And I thought it was so fascinating because it's like, but I'll just hold on. I won't tell him no. It's like, if the paycheck comes in, then the paycheck will change our lives. And literally all this stuff happened. All these things came out about him. And all of a sudden the door was hard closed. It was a
yeah,
severance. And that's what I've noticed time and time again in my life, is if it's a no, it's not a maybe. It is a no. It's a
yeah,
severance.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, mate. And, fortunately, even at my stage of life, God's still giving me second chances when I don't do it right the first time. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's the grace of a good father.
yeah, 100%, exactly right. So, yeah, it's amazing, being, and you do need to listen, because you do need to have time to slow down and listen, because God knows what's best. And I think sometimes we like to think we know what's best, but yeah, we don't.
Yeah, and I would love to learn a little bit more from you, because we talked about this right before we hit record, but you were talking about having your quiet time. And for me, I also have my quiet time. That means a lot to me. What does your quiet time look like? How does that look for you? And then how have you seen that directly impact your life and even your business?
Yeah, it's been incredible, Steve. I think, as we were discussing, I generally get up at around 5. I do get up at 5 every morning, and the first thing that I do is I read my Bible. So I read my Bible, and obviously I don't have any goal to read my Bible in a year or anything like that. I actually like to ponder on what I'm reading, and just think about it. And what I'll typically do is write down a part of that Bible verse that actually spoke to me, and then write down, what I believe its application is to me. So I've got like a year to a day to a year. No, sorry, 1 day to a page annual diary. And so I
Yeah.
write down there, so whole page A4, write down there what Bible verse I read, what it said to me, think about how that applies to me, and then I'll actually write down 10 things that I'm thankful for today. So try to make sure that I'm focusing on things that I'm grateful for, and I go through that process, and then I'll pray. And one of the things I'm not as good at, but I really found incredible benefit from, but I've just allowed busyness sometimes to crowd it out, is actually then just sitting for 10 minutes or so in silence, just being able to be quiet before God and just writing down anything that comes to me. Um, Writing, and then just obviously, and I think sometimes, having been through the scripture, having written down what I'm thankful for, Often it's weird. Sometimes it's just reminders of things that I've sort of forgotten about, or so on, but that actually come, and I can write them down and pop them down there. And so just go through that prayer time with God, just trying to listen. I won't say I'm great at it. It's one of those, who is, but it's, I try to do it because I find so much value in it, and it's interesting because I then sort of from there I morph into just updating my to-do list, and also then planning out my day. And this has been one of the most powerful things for me. It's been like literally sitting down and going 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. quiet time. 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. I run. 7 a.m. To 7:30 shower, shave, all that sort of stuff, and then just literally plan the whole day out so that the important things on the to-do list are actually getting done. And that's sort of how my quiet time looks. And if I do that for the day, then my days are so productive and so focused on the things that matter. And also, on the right hand side, like on my Sundays, in my day to a year to, what is it, a day to a page, I'll write down prayers, things I've got, like prayers for my clients, prayers for people that I know, those sorts of things. And typically on a Sunday, I will go through that. But often during the week, I can also come back to that and just pray for people and things and situations that are on that sort of prayer list that I write on the Sunday. So, yeah.
That's really good. I think I'm in a similar boat. The way that my mornings usually start off, I'm up at 5:30, so you got a 30-minute head start on me. But I'm up, I pray for about 10, 15 minutes, then I go for a walk, and that's my quiet time. So with that is I'll go and I walk around, and I love being out in nature.
Mhm.
Being out in nature, there's something about it. And I
Yeah.
also don't know what's going on in my head right now. So if you hear that, it sounds like somebody's doing something crazy. But
No, I can't
with
hear it.
okay, fantastic. So there we go. But what I've noticed is like early in the morning. So early in the morning for me, 5:45 is when I'm out on a walk. There's nothing else happening.
Yeah.
It's just quiet out there. So that's where there's no distractions. I'm not on my phone. There's nothing because I have my do not disturb on my phone on until 7 a.m. So there's no one can get through to me until 7 a.m. And the way that I play that is I go out and I talk to the Lord the way I'm talking to you, just out loud. And I'm sure that there's people in the neighborhood think I'm a maniac because I'm just in there talking, and it's obvious I don't have any earbuds in or a headset on. And I'll sit there and I just talk to him, and then I just give him the last few minutes of just silence. And I just feel like every single day he speaks something to me because I'm of the belief that he's always speaking to us,
Yeah.
but we're just not always tuned into hearing him. And
100%.
that's something that is new to me in the past. And by new, I mean the last 4 or 5 years. Is because before that, it's like the way that I was raised, it was almost as if you had to, burn incense and you had to bring
Yeah.
the best of the best offering that you had to be lit into the holy of holies. It's like,
Yeah.
but that's not really the case. I believe
No,
that if you're saved through Jesus Christ, then now you have access to the King, and He wants to talk to you. That is your Father in
100%.
heaven.
Yeah, that is
So
so
He
right.
wants to speak to you. I mean, the same way you have kids, I have one son, is he doesn't have to perform some kind of ritual for him to talk to me. He can
No.
just talk to me. He has access. This is
Yeah.
something I talk to. It's very interesting. Like being able to be in rooms with people that most people will never be able to have to be in the room in, and 99% of people will never have the opportunities I've had to be in those same rooms. They're just people, right? But the
Yep.
only thing that separates them is the access to them.
Yep.
So with God is our Father. The thing is that until we see Him that way, we put Him into this room where it's like, oh, we don't have access. It's like we don't have access to Him. I can't talk to Him that way. I have to doubt our holy Lord. It's like you can talk to Him normally. I
Yep.
believe that if Jesus was born in this day and age and He was sent to the Jews in this day and age, He would speak normal English. He probably wouldn't
Yeah.
speak
Yeah.
King James. So I
Yep.
think that there's so much. Well, at that time you'd be speaking Hebrew, but there's so much to me that I love about how you do it. So how have you seen that play out in helping people with their cash flow? Because when you're working with people in their businesses, I'm sure you work with clientele that are not Christians. So how do you see that playing out with those clientele? Because you talked about praying for your clients, which I do as well, and I think that's beautiful. Because those are things that most of these people will never know because they're not Christians, they don't care.
Yeah.
But I do it anyways because I just want to. For me, assisting them is it's like, okay, Lord, what do you see for them that I'm not seeing? How do I assist them the best? This is the things that are in the scope of work I'm doing for them. What are you doing here? How are you working in this person's life, and how are you using me to do that? And I just always want to be very top of mind that this is his kids too. Like these are people that he loves too, whether they love him back or not. So it's like
Yeah.
how do you see that playing out in your business?
Well, the older I get, the more I realize that, I think as business owners, it's very easy for us to get focused on the business and business building and almost like building our empire, if you like. And but I've got to that point now where I go, well, none of this really matters. At the end of the day,
Mm.
eventually, we'll pass on to eternity, um, and all of this stuff that we're doing, all this stuff we're putting our time and energy into, really has no eternal consequence unless we're building relationships and sharing the gospel with people. And so the older I get, the more I realize that needs to be the priority in what I do. And so it doesn't mean that I sit down with people and bash them around the head with the Bible from the moment we first meet. But most of the people who come to me because there's some need, some struggle in their life, obviously in regards to their finances, where there's often a lot of shame, embarrassment, fear, anxiety, all sorts of things attached to it. And it's a very, very personal journey that take most of these people on. And so it does open doors. And when people see that I'm not going to criticize them, I'm not going to judge them, I am just purely here to help them understand their finances and manage it in a way that allows them to move forward and eliminate all that fear, anxiety, shame, and embarrassment, get rid of all of that, and help take those worries away from them. I think it just opens the opportunity to then say, "Hey, look, can I pray for you?" And I have never had anyone actually say no to that. And so I'll just pray for them. And as a result of that, they almost come to expect that at the end of every single meeting, which is an amazing thing. And now, please don't get me wrong, I don't do this with everyone. It's just when the moment is right. Um,
Hmm.
and like I think God nudges you as to when the moment is right. And then that just in itself opens the opportunity for all sorts of other conversations. I've got a client at the moment that our church runs a 4-week program on Jesus on Life. And it's basically for new people to who don't know anything about Christianity, to just introduce them to Jesus. And so I'm trying at the moment. I've got a couple of clients at the moment that are very keen. We've just got to line the times up for them to come along to that. So I guess the more I move on in my business and in life, I realize that that's where I'm going to have the greatest impact, not in the skills and the experience God's given me with finance.
That's beautiful. I love how you do that. That's something that I'm going to start adopting more is just listening to that still small voice and like, hey, no, that would be a good time to just
Yeah,
ask them if you can pray for them. There's been a few times I've done that, but it's been fewer and farther between than I would like to admit. So when you're working with these business owners, we'll talk a little bit more tactical.
sure.
Is with these business owners that you work with, what have you noticed? Because you talked about it for a second earlier, where they typically you could halfway cut down the rate of people who fail in the first 1 to 2 years, first 2 to 3 years, if they just understood their finances. So what do you notice is like the one big thing, or if there might be three big things where it's like if they just looked at these metrics once a day, once a week, it would directly impact the decisions that they make.
That's a great question, Steve. And in the entrepreneurial world, particularly, there's this big um, there's this big focus on revenue as a metric for success. And you would know this, especially in the e-commerce world, because this is where it's very big. We can focus on, we've made $1 million business, but how much of that did you actually get to keep?
Yep.
And that's very big in e-commerce, but it's as it is in a lot of industries. And so what I try to do is, and I try to keep it really simple. I have a very strong background in financial education, so teaching the absolute basics. And I carry that over into my entrepreneurs because most entrepreneurs just haven't learned about finance. They've never been taught how to manage money, and business is a whole another level of that. Um, and so I always start with the basics, and I'm not an accounting background, so I literally come to it from a cash flow and financial education perspective. And that is, look, there's really only six numbers that we need, depending on what type of business it is, six numbers we need to track. And that is, well, what is my revenue? Yes, we need to know that, of course. And revenue is a good thing as long as we may managing to keep some of that at the end of the day. But what is a revenue? Salary. What do I need to pay myself to make this journey sustainable? And that's super, super important because so many entrepreneurs just keep pushing it off, pushing it. If there's something left at the end of the month, they might get to keep it. But I actually get my clients to think the opposite way around and going, okay, well, if you're going to make this sustainable, what do you need to be paying yourself? And let's work towards making that happen before we add too many other expenses in. And that takes a lot of the pressure off, which then buys you the time to be around for a lot longer to work out what really helps me then grow and scale sustainably. Then if you're a business like yours with, COGS, cost of goods sold, what are those? Overheads. And then we look at, okay, well, what do I got after all of that's taken out? What do I need to be putting aside for tax? And then quite simply, what have I got left to keep? It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. We can look at a whole lot of, and of course, there are things like, well, what are actually my profit margins on the cost of goods sold? And therefore, what do I then get to keep to bring over to pay my salary and my overheads and all those sort of things? But really, it's just those six numbers and variations of those six numbers and how we get to that. So for anyone, any business owner, I say, look, do not overcomplicate this. Don't listen to your accountant from often they'll pat you on the back and say, well done, you've made a profit. And you go, well, where is it? It's not in my bank account. And so I actually teach them to track cash flow, not their P&L, because as you probably know, P&L doesn't include debt repayments. It doesn't include any tax you had to pay or any drawings you've taken from the business or any major equipment you've had to purchase. And so it sort of lies to you in a way because that's not really what us as entrepreneurs think of as profit. We think of as profit as I've got more money in my bank account today than I did yesterday. That's not what your accountant's thinking about. So I bring it back to the cash flow so people can really understand where am I at and what do I need to do to make that profit bigger or that loss smaller next month.
That's awesome. I love that. So for people who are looking for someone like you or looking for you specifically, how do they find you? Because I know that with the businesses that listen to my podcast, that a lot of them are going to be small to medium-sized businesses, so they're going to be in need of this. There's also some businesses that are going to listen to this that maybe they're gigantic, where they're closer to 100 million and above. That hopefully they have figured out that if they're making money or not. Some of these people play fun games though, like you understand this, where they do a bunch of different seed rounds, so they just go get a bunch of venture backing, and that's how they end up paying all the salaries and everything else. But they're not actually cash flow positive. No. It's fascinating to me. I didn't know that was even a thing for many years for you to be cash flow negative and actually still make money. It was just like this weird concept.
It is. I actually worked with a Christian consulting firm last week. They do a lot of work in sort of the moral injury and trauma, counseling and those sorts of things. And they came to see me to help them work through their cash flow. And it was interesting to me because they were, like I said to them, look, you need to hit, I think it was around $41,000 in revenue every month just so that you'll break even, because their profit margin was like 35%. So, you take 35% of $40,000 and I think their overheads were about 12. But they wanted to grow and scale. There was 6 of them. They all wanted to be paid by the business, and they're putting a lot of sweat equity into it at the moment. But they weren't even at the point where they were cash flow positive. And for them to all be employed by the business, I showed them how they needed to be making $170,000 a month, and yet they were talking about going out and trying to find $500,000 of sort of investment seed money to actually help them employ themselves so that they could be cash flow positive. So that they could employ themselves and throw themselves into it full time. But basically, because they weren't yet profitable, they would have eaten through that $500,000 in a year. And unless they were really focused on their cash flow, they would have got to the end of that $500,000 and still been cash flow negative, and which was not at all what they wanted. And so working through that cash flow is super, super, super important.
Yeah, they would have had to have quadrupled the size of the business in a year.
100%. Yeah, exactly right. And they just didn't have the systems in place to actually make that happen. So we're working through that with them right now. But they were a bit disappointed, I have to say, but we'll get them on the right track.
Well, I mean, there's a verse that I read, and then I would love for you to tell everyone where they can find you. The verse I read, and I actually sent it to a group of my friends. It's Proverbs 27:6. Let me see if I can. I will pull it up instead of butchering it. But I read out of the New Living Translation. But it's Proverbs 27:6 is wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy.
Yes.
So, I mean, for you being able to tell them, it's like, hey, instead of just being like, yeah, you go get them, go get that 500,000, and you do that, and then you can pay me to stick alongside you. It's like you could, and you
Yeah.
technically could do that, but it's like, is that ethically what you should do, especially as a Christian? Probably not. I mean,
Yeah.
being able to be honest, like that's what real authenticity is. Authenticity is a word that's thrown around all over the place now, but what is authentically you? Like, who are you?
Yeah.
Because it's like when you're talking to your wife, you wouldn't do that to your wife. You wouldn't tell her, yeah, you go get some money. You would say, babe, I love you, and this is not the right move for you right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the same way that you would treat someone that you love is the same way you should treat them. And I love that you did that. It's like, you probably shouldn't do that. It's like
Yeah.
you don't have the skill sets, you don't have the infrastructure in place
Yeah.
for you to quadruple the business in a year.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. It's yeah. You need to. It's like, and they said, and I said to them, no. You need to earn. It's almost like they need to earn their stripes first. They
Yeah,
need to learn how to build. They need to learn how to be profitable first, and then we know how to scale it so they can maintain its profitability, rather than just hoping that some angel investor is going to come in and dump a whole lot of money in their pocket, and then they'll figure out how to be profitable. It's like, oh, that's a way
yeah.
to blow a lot of money and make a lot of people unhappy. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So where can people find you, Phil, if they are interested in your services and how you can help them out?
Well, I've got a website, philmcgilvray.com, which they can easily go to, and there's links there just to contact me. But also, I've just recently established, you've probably heard of School, the sort of the new
Yeah,
community platform, set up a school group there because I do want to, like, I've done a lot of um, high ticket working one on one with clients that pay me lots of money to help them get their business sorted, but it's not where I want to head. I actually want to create an environment for entrepreneurs to learn together. So I've created a school group called Money Boss Entrepreneur, to help entrepreneurs learn the basics, and we literally do it together, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
the goal in that group is that every month, I teach them what to do, and then every month we have this like container around the time where we say, this is your time to do all the steps that I teach them for this month, so that we can go back and review what happened last month, and then we can move, and then you can say it's done. I'm done. I am on top of it, and then I can move forward for the next month. And so that's it's called Money Boss Entrepreneur, and that's a school group that I've only literally just started. So um, but come to philmcgilvray.com first, and that's probably the best spot.
amazing. I really love that. I love the one to many approach. I think it just gives people different levels of access to you, and you can impact more people at one time instead of being one to one. Like you and I talking, this is incredible, but it's also going out one to many. So it's
Yeah,
going to be able to help more people than just you and I having a chat. That's why I wanted to do it this way. But for anyone, it's going to be in the show notes. So if you are wondering where to find that, instead of just like, okay, how do I spell? You don't worry about it. We got it linked
yeah.
out. Go down there, click on it. It makes it much easier that way. Phil, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and for the very first time meeting. And here we are recording this podcast. I just want to thank you for coming on and spending time with me.
Thanks, Steve. I love what you do, mate, and yeah, it's a privilege to be here.
Thank you. For everyone listening, we'll catch you in the next episode.